students, welcome to Year 11 Biology and Module 4 Ecosystem Dynamics. This is video number 16 and the first in our final section where we start to think about future ecosystems. So the purpose of this particular video is to help you to focus on the investigating changes in past ecosystems that might inform our approach to the management of future ecosystems, including the role of human-induced selection pressures on the extinction of species. This is the third inquiry question that's part of Module 4, and it's the last one that we need to deal with. And the question that we need to keep in mind as we work through this final series of videos is, how can human activity impact on an ecosystem? Now, this isn't new, but most of what we looked at in terms of our past environments, only a very small portion of those overlapped with human activity. In this final section, we look at some significant ways in which humans have, are, and continue to impact on ecosystems and what this might mean for biodiversity in the future. So we've had a look at the complementary processes of speciation and extinction. In extinction, we get a reduction in species numbers. This is a reduction in biodiversity, and significant instances of large decreases in biodiversity have been referred to as mass extinctions. So it's not a mass extinction if we lose all of the Tasmanian tigers. It's a shame, but it's not a mass extinction. However, if we lose all the mammals, that certainly would be a mass extinction. So one of the things that we want to try and do when we're looking back in time, back into our past environments, is to try and get a sense of the impact of particular events on biodiversity as a broad brush rather than on individual species, even some species which are in serious danger. Now, the complement to extinction is speciation, and in speciation, biodiversity increases. We actually increase the number of species. These two processes occur all the time, and we've talked about cycling and the fact that we can look back into the past and we can see lots of cycles that have operated in the past. There's been occasions where there's been massive speciation. Probably the Cambrian event is the most obvious one, where we've just had this blossoming of huge numbers of different types of species, a mass speciation event. But we've also looked at things like the Permian extinction and the fact that that created some really significant drops in biodiversity, up to 90% in some cases of the aquatic species. So some of what we're looking at when we try and analyze the effects of speciation and extinction is we need to look at either the micro level, the level that is local to us. Perhaps that could be local to your own backyard, but it could also be to your area, to your state, to your country. But also we need to consider the global impact. What is happening to biodiversity as a result of some of the human activities that maybe are causing significant change to the planet as a whole. There's a couple of great resources that are worth having a look at as we go into this last section of work. The movie 2040, which Damon Gummo basically produced and stars in, is a fantastic vision of what 2040 could look like. That was made, I think, around 2019, so there was still a kind of a 20 years into the future thing, but we're already on the way to some of the things that Damon looked at in that particular video. And sadly, we haven't done a lot since that video was released. But certainly there are things that are being looked at all around the place. The other thing that I can recommend is Dr. Carl's little book of climate science. I think it's a fantastic read. It's very, very accessible, very readable, very interesting, and something that presents a lot of the important facts that are associated with the science of climate change. However, it's important as we start this final section that you understand what we're thinking about or what we're talking about when we use these key terms. So we want to talk about past ecosystems. Now, past ecosystems aren't just the ones that were around yesterday, though they could be. They're also the ones that were around thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of years ago. But here we're looking forward, not just backwards. In fact, here we're looking much further forward than backwards. And backwards is basically how history can help us hopefully not repeat the same mistakes. And hopefully when we look at past ecosystems, as we do when we look at history, we try and learn from the mistakes of the past. We try and understand the sorts of things that can have significant impacts on biodiversity and what we might be able to do to learn from what's happened in the past and perhaps change what might be happening in the future. So we need to understand the management of future ecosystems. We need to understand how human activity can impact on ecosystems and how we can change that for the better. We need to think about the fact that whilst evolution is a process that is based on variation within populations, different individuals with different traits, that selecting agents within the environment act on those individuals in different ways and preferentially select one or other, and then reproduction is the process that allows those successful genes to be passed into the next generation. And this has happened and is happening constantly in all environments. But what's starting to happen is that humans are creating some of these selection pressures. Human activity is actually forcing change on populations, and often it's doing it at a rate that is way too fast. Populations need some time to adjust, need some time for the dominant individuals or the better suited individuals to be able to survive and reproduce. And the problem is that some of the changes that are happening as a result of human activity are wiping the entire populations out, or at least are wiping so many of them out that we're not giving them an opportunity to adjust to the changes that we're making. And of course, this is leading inexorably to the extinction of more and more species during this period of geological time. So interesting is the current state of geological time, that it's starting to be referred to by a slightly different name. If you look at the geological time scale, and again, when we ask you to use this, we ask you to use it as a tool. We don't ask you to memorize all of the different epochs, all of the different eras and the ages and the periods. What we do want you to do is to be able to understand what sort of information you can extract from the geological time scale. The current time frame, the geological time frame that we're in, is a time frame that goes back only about the last 12,000 years, following the last major ice age. So we're all familiar with the ice age from the movies, if not from anything else, and the fact that there was some of those very large megafauna, the mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, a large number of dire wolves, as well as those very unique megafauna marsupials that we've talked about previously here in Australia. Following that time and the destruction basically of a lot of, or the extinction of a lot of those different organisms, we've been in a new geological time period. Now the problem is 11,700 years is very short period of time, and yet the changes that are happening have happened much, much quicker than that. So what's now being referred to is an epoch known as the Anthropocene, and anthropo basically means human. So we're starting to actually name a geological time period after ourselves, which could be regarded as a level of arrogance in order to explain just how much of an impact humans have had. But it's also a sad indictment on the fact that humans have actually had a significant role in directing the evolution of life in particularly the last 200 or so years. The problem with it is that it really describes the recent Earth history when our own activity actually started to have a significant impact on the planet's climate and its ecosystems. But if I said to you, when do you think we should start counting the Anthropocene? When is the point that human activity actually started to have a significant impact? Does it go back as far as the Egyptians? Do we only need to go back the last couple of 100 years to the Industrial Revolution, where we certainly started to realize just how valuable coal and fossil fuels were, and we started to burn those, we started to combust those, and very, very quickly we started to create carbon soot and increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But is it something more significant? Was it perhaps the end of World War II when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? These had massive implications? Is it the fact that we've not just used nuclear power for weaponry, but that we're actually using it for power generation? Is the fact that there's been a couple of disasters associated with nuclear power and the fallout as a result of that? Is that also something that we need to consider, that is a human activity that's had a significant impact on life on Earth? These are questions. I'm not going to answer them because there's lots of debate around these, but one thing is very clear and one thing is very important to take away with you from this particular video, and that is human activity is changing the biosphere at a rate that is greater than it has ever been changed in the past. The thing that's difficult is we're in it. So the question then is, should we continue to do what we're doing, or are there things that we can change and perhaps reverse some of these impacts so that we shift that balance back away from extinction back to speciation? Because at the moment, much of the human activity is actually driving many species on Earth towards extinction. Thanks for watching.